Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Phys Ed Summit from ESPECHAT. This is our second summit, and thank you to the Phys Edagogy crew for their guidance and leading the way for high quality. My name is Carrie Bullis, and we're talking about standards-based grading with Wendy Jones. Live today, please use our Tozzle page so you can join the discussion. You can find the Tozzle page at speechat.weebly.com, and then you're going to click on ESPECHAT Summit, and then click on the 2016 schedule. You'll find all the links there for the Tozzles and winners from earlier as well. So since we are using a lot of technology for our sessions, things can go wrong. And if you're experiencing any difficulty, use the Tozzle chat and I will try to help you through it. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can use the Tozzle chat as well. And then Wendy will take questions at the end of her presentation. I'd also love to see you posting on social media what you are learning. And then don't forget to use both hashtags, ESPECHAT and hashtag Phys Ed Summit. I know that Wendy has lots of information for us and lots of slides, so we can get started with her.
Great, thank you, Carrie. I'd like to have a big shout out to Matt and Ryan, especially Matt Bassett, for all his work behind the scenes to make this happen so that we could do all this wonderful sharing. So I'm going to get rocking and rolling, so I'm going to share my screen right now. And, oops, sorry. I'll get there. Okay, so I'm assuming you can see my slides, and I'm just going to get rolling. So welcome, and thank you for choosing to spend your valuable time with us to look at standards-based grading. My focus for this session will be at the elementary level, but if you happen to be a secondary teacher, please stay with us. And all of the things that we're going to say today will apply to you. And when it comes to secondary, there are other considerations that happen. So, this little piece will be more the foundational pieces that go into standards-based grading and its perspective with standards-based learning. So this is my journey along the way. And I'll be sharing what I've learned from experience, the good, bad, and the ugly, and what I've taken from blogs and books and articles and webinars and workshops, and talked to experts on standards-based grading, and I've listened to teachers who've been committing to moving their practice forward in standards-based grading. I've heard many questions along the way, and I've discovered that the more I learn, the more I need to know more stuff. So it's a never-ending cycle. But it's a great journey, and welcome to this. I'm welcoming you to this journey that we're going on. So I don't claim to be in any way, shape, or form an expert, but I am extremely curious and determined that this process is the best interest of our students. So basically, I'm a self-described nerd. Speaking of questions, I suppose the best place to start is with essential questions. So this will help us focus this presentation. So I'm going to start with, how can I create a reporting system that supports all of my students in their journey to and through physical literacy? Or how can I create a reporting system that provides learning that's enduring, learning that students will use 40 years from when they leave my program? So I'm going to frame the objectives around learning targets. I like the model an instructional strategy that's helped me to become more purposeful and focused in my teaching. Some of you may be familiar with the structure of what, how, and why, and I'm going to use that structure for this session. So we're going to start with the why, and in the why, I'll share some reasons that standards-based reporting might serve our students better than traditional grading system. So we'll be looking at a perspective that standards-based grading offers, including purpose, motivation, and benefactors. So you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink until you make him thirsty. So here we have a paradigm shift. In an effort to get all of our stakeholders to embrace standards-based grading, we need to spend as much time as it takes to help them wrap their heads around this new way of doing things. It's been my experience that districts and schools who've rushed into standards-based grading without buy-in from most of the learning community anyway, they've struggled with pushback. This process takes time and thoughtful communication, and it does take work in the beginning, and I will not sugarcoat it. So when I go through the what, we'll look at some of the philosophical shifts in thinking and examine where standards-based grading fits into the big picture of student learning. I'll take you through an example of some of the teachers' decisions that are foundational in a standards-based learning environment, with grading as a piece of the instructional design. Based on questions I've heard from teachers who've been engaged in implementing this process, I hope to provide some ideas on how to attend to those challenges. I'll be sharing some practices that have helped teachers manage their way through standards-based grading process so that there's a maximum benefit for your students. Then we'll examine the how. So I'll share some ideas for implementing the process with your PLC or your professional learning community, and discuss 3 main decisions that should be made before beginning the implementation process. So hopefully this will be very practical for you. So we're going to start with why. We want our students to have a clear picture of what's expected of them in demonstrating their learning. So we want to be able to see beyond that busy, happy, good, and kids engaged in learning and having fun and playing with their skills, and to really dig deeper and reveal the thinking behind their moving. So the learning becomes transferable and relative, and it goes far beyond our classrooms. So in standards-based learning, our students learn not only what to learn, but how to demonstrate that learning. And in addition, we want our students to value and justify the learning. So I'm going to take you on a little journey right now.
I don't always want you to help me. Do you know why? I want to figure it out on my own. Even when it doesn't turn out the way I want. I know it's not wrong. Because he taught me how to think. And how to dream. I'm about to make something that I know will make you proud.
And better yet, to make themselves proud. So when we first see that little Lego box, some adult will read the directions and put the toy together and woohoo, this is real fun for you, right? And then the next step, the child and the adult work together to follow the directions on the box. And then gradually the child's able to follow the directions and build their own Lego. Eventually, there are patterns in the builds that can be used to build something that doesn't have directions. The bricks fit together to create something new. And if this happens, there's a potential for application of that learning into the big world. Now we're going to shift that into our content. So here we have a scenario. The child's learning how to perform an underhand throw. And they're given the cues, step, tick, tock. The learning may or may not stick. Imagine that the student is also given the critical elements of an underhand throw. So face the target, step with the opposite foot, swing the arm in the direction of the target, and follow through with a straight arm toward the target. There may be a greater chance that the learning sticks with more students. Now, consider infusing the why. So the purpose for these critical elements. Each one of them serves a purpose in increasing the chances that the object will arrive at the target. The skill and the purpose are carried along with the child as they apply the content to other activities. Maybe even create their own games or have that same learning carry over to more complex skills like serving a volleyball or striking. And in a sense, all of this is going to contribute to our students' ability to find joy in what they do. So that when it all is said and done, this is really our target. So I'm going to share with you an actual aha application of learning moment with a second grader I had several years ago. My school at the time had introduced a new playground structure to the yard. It was this wonderful glider that looks much like this one, but it was a little bit longer. And the kids would drop off on one, they'd take off on one end of the glider, stop midway, struggle, and either fall or drop to the ground. The result is many kids making trips to the office for ice. Administrative answer to this problem was either make the glider off limits or remove it entirely. Well, it just so happened that my second graders and I were working on a pendulum swing and how a pendulum swing can help to increase momentum. So we were investigating this in a lot of different ways. Then my friend Kyrie came out and was really upset that they were threatening to take out the glider. And he pulled me out to the yard and said, I have a really good idea. And he walked with me to the glider and suggested that if kids use a pendulum swing once they're on the glider, they'd have enough momentum to get to the other side. And if all the kids knew how to do that, then maybe they wouldn't take the glider away. And thank goodness administration had faith in a second grader's ideas, and the glider is still used in the school today. So now let's take a look through some more of the reasons why standards-based grading might be a good fit for your school or district. In a standards-based learning environment, differentiation is key. Students come to us with a wide variety of experiences, opportunities, learning styles, body types, you name it. Standards-based physical education allows students to have multiple opportunities to demonstrate their level of understanding or performance, often with a variety of contexts. Formative assessment is present throughout all lessons, and students are provided many methods to express their learning. Throughout the process in standards-based learning, descriptive feedback, so, what does it look like? And prescriptive feedback, well, what do I need to do to move my learning forward? Drive the learning process by giving information to the students. In our traditional grading system, an A has become overinflated. Students can earn an A without ever applying their learning. A student can be completely compliant and receive an A, but not remember a single thing. How sad is that? In standards-based learning, the focus is on growing and learning. Proficient is something to strive for. It's no longer average or so-so. So ideally, we want our students to become proficient at everything and find something that interests them to go beyond proficient. So in a standards-based system, the standards-based grades are based solely on the demonstration of proficiency within the physical education content. So non-academic indicators aren't really factored into the grading. Probably a bigger issue in secondary than in elementary, but when we think about it, effort and sportsmanship are generally what we have measured for many, many, many years. And I was always struggling with the subjective nature of determining somebody else's effort. I could peel out some evidence for sportsmanship, but the criteria for sportsmanship was kind of vague and out there and not really defined. So in a standards-based system, both effort and sportsmanship become more defined for your students and for you. So in standards-based learning, the skills and concepts are more likely to stick, which means that if they're indeed learned, they won't need to be relearned. I still see high school teachers spending days teaching their students to dribble a basketball, first in stationary, then moving, then with their dominant hand, and then with their non-dominant hand. And it's pretty sad when that learning should have stuck with them in elementary school. So we're going to take a look at some mind shifts. So I'm sure that we've all experienced this, is that your kids are really excited to see you and they say, what are we doing today? Well, in a standards-based system, they're going to be asking you, what are we learning today? Which is a big mind shift. And then in traditional reporting, it's what grade did I get, to standards-based, where it's what did I learn and what am I learning? And in a traditional reporting system, it's pretty much one, you did it, I've captured it, it's one and done. And then in a standard-based system, it's more of a process. So where am I in my learning journey? And in traditional grading, grades are a distraction to learning, or they can be, and society has given grades a great deal of power. But in a standards-based reporting system, learning is the main purpose of school, and grades are simply placeholders. And in a traditional reporting, averaging for grading period, and this applies probably more to secondary than it does for us, but it is something we need to consider. And then in a standards-based reporting system, the current level of understanding, or where the level of achievement, where the students are at the end of that grading period, is what determines their grade. In a traditional reporting system, scores, numbers, symbols, all are communicated to students, sometimes with a little bit of feedback. But in standards-based reporting, feedback is number one. It's really descriptive and prescriptive feedback that's provided from multiple sources that's going to inform kids on their journey to learn. And this is a big one. In traditional reporting, it tends to be compliance. And in standards-based reporting, it's really about the learning. So, so let's start with this, where report cards really do fit in with this big picture of student learning. So they offer an opportunity to communicate with your families. It's a vehicle to communicate the destination and the roadmap for your students. So they're very clearly, they understand where they're going and where they've come. And then it offers tools for teachers to make decisions about planning in order to move their students forward. So there's a lot of things that the report card offers to really support that whole notion of student learning. Now we're going to move into the what. So let's talk about what grading really is. It's a snapshot of the most convincing evidence for the determined level of mastery of content. Plain and simple. Nothing more, nothing less. It's just a snapshot. So grading is the big picture, and, or sorry, wrong answer. So learning is the big picture, and grading is just a little part of that picture in that whole idea of learning. So in this section, I'm going to go over 3 philosophical shifts that are key to standards-based learning. So very important that you align your proficiency scales to your assessments, and I'll talk more about that. And then plan for your instruction that provides the most convincing evidence of student achievement. And I'll take you through a system to do that. And then how do we take that data and make the best decisions to report to students and families? So that'll be a piece we'll go through also. So let's even open up the picture even wider. And this is where we have this big, huge picture that's beyond school, which is physical literacy. And physical literacy is the foundation upon which our national standards have been crafted. So with the ability to move with competence and confidence in a variety of activities in multiple environments that benefit the healthy development of the whole person. If you were listening to Terry's session, you heard a lot about this. And basically, a physically literate person is on a journey to apply the skills and motivation and dispositions needed to participate in any and all physical activities. They can adjust their physical activity choices as life circumstances change. Participate in a wide variety of health-enhancing activities now and later in life. Meet the physical requirements of their occupation and daily life. Avoid injuries, big one. Remain independent in old age. And discover their joy or delight in moving for a lifetime. So remember, this is a journey. So learning is a journey, physical literacy is a journey. So we're all in this together. So now I'm going to take you through the role of physical literacy, the role of physical education in physical literacy. So, so we have the first thing, when kids just come to school in general, they learn about themselves. They learn their dispositions. They learn their ability to take risks. They learn about themselves. Do I like being in big groups? Do I like smaller groups? Am I outgoing? Am I introverted? Do I need to know everything about something before I'll try something new? All those things are things that our kids learn about themselves. And then, and the second piece is this huge piece of now they need to learn content. So all the concepts and skills and behaviors that go into learning the content. And then this is the key piece that I think is really where the rubber hits the road. And that's bringing those two pieces together and learning about what do I know about myself and what do I know about this content and how am I going to make that real in my life so that I can make choices for the rest of my life. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this center chunk, which is learning content, and we're going to explore those skills, concepts, and behaviors, and how do we account for those. So here's where we start. We do have documents that help us to craft learning experiences through our national, state, or district standards. So this is where we start. And then once we've chosen the standards that we believe will move our students in their physical literacy journey, the next step is to use standards-based instructional design. Standards-based grading relies on standards-based instruction. You may be familiar with backward design or understanding by design. They are models that are very similar. What we're going to use is the SPID process. So here we're going to start by unpacking the content standard. So we're going to reveal the content within the content standard. So we're going to take that same underhand throw with a mature pattern, and you can see that this is second grade. So they need to demonstrate the critical elements of an underhand throw. So this is for my purposes, how I unpack the content standard, because I need to do this for myself. So this is not necessarily what my students will say, but this is what they will do and my thinking behind it. So they need to face the target with their shoulders square in preparation for the throwing action. And why is this? Because I want them to stabilize their body, which allows their arms to swing for accuracy. And then I want them to step with the opposite foot to the throwing arm. And why? To keep the body balanced for force. And then to get that leg that's on the same side as the throwing arm out of the way to provide a straight line for accuracy. And then straight arm in your backswing, throwing under the shoulder in line with the target. And why? Once again, because it allows the arm swing to line up with the target for accuracy. And in that forward swing, the follow through under the shoulder to the target, because the arm swing lining up with the target for accuracy, I already said that. And then follow through the straight arm toward the target provides a long lever that will produce more force. And that straight arm will also help to check for accuracy. So these are all things that my second graders may get to that point of really understanding the rationale behind it. I provide it, we play with it, we might start with the why, and then we might come to the what. And then in third grade, the content gets a little bit more complex. So now we're adjusting to accuracy. So so we need to adjust the speed of the swing to account for distance. And we need to adjust for the point of release for the height of the ball. And then we have this part of reasonable accuracy. So for that, the objects need to hit the target most of the time. And this would be what proficient is. And then in fifth grade, it gets a little bit more complex. So we just have different objects with different weights and densities, and we have to account for those. So that would be fifth grade. So now once we have unpacked that content and we've seen it in perspective, we're going to determine the evidence of the learning. So on the top, you see a proficiency scale of 4 points. So we have not yet, getting there, got it, and wow. Thank you, Sarah Gutierrez-Hartman, for that. I like the simplicity of this. But basically, there's also symbols that are associated with this. So not assessed, 1, 2, and 3. And then down below, you see where that content is now placed into these different levels of proficiency. So for the not assessed there's not any evidence of the underhand throw, or there's not enough to declare that the student's level. And so this whole piece of not yet is really important. And then for the level 1 is one or more critical elements is missing most of the time. The objects are arriving close to the target some of the time. And then got it, most of the critical elements are performed consistently and the object arrives close to or at the target most of the time with different objects. And then, oh wow, gets far more complex and it's a more dynamic situation and there's changing targets and maybe the targets are moving. So once we've determined that evidence, then we need to select or design an assessment tool. So out here, we have lots to choose from. We have everything from pencil and paper to, I was in Roseville, California, doing a session on standards-based grading, and a teacher shared with me the popsicle sticks here. So she had a peanut butter jar full of different colored popsicle sticks, and she was, as she would give feedback to her students, she would give them a different colored stick that denoted which level of proficiency her kids were on. I tried it, and it was a little cumbersome because the kids didn't know what to do with the sticks once they had them. So then I went to clothespins and used that same idea, but I would put clothespins on the back of a kid's shirt. At the end of the class, I would have the kids turn around, hold their clothespins up, and I take a picture of them, and so I could document their levels of proficiency that way. And then we have, you know, using videos. And technology has really changed our use of assessment tools. So we can use Solo Taxonomy, Class Dojo, Plickers, Google Forms. If you're a Google Classroom, there's so many things that you can use. So you can actually capture students' levels of proficiency using Google Forms. And to tell you the truth, if you have a digital portfolio like Seesaw or FreshGrade or even Google Classroom, you basically don't even need a report card at all, because that digital portfolio does all the work for you. But while you're assessing, remembering to choose that tool, we also need to remember that feedback is extremely important. So not only just being able to note where your students are, but make sure that as you go, you're giving them feedback, because this is how they learn to grow. Thank you, Bill Gates. Now I'm going to move to the instruction, and this is the part that teachers are really good at. So this is where we thrive. For the most part, we're great at choosing or designing engaging activities that bring the learning to life. And so some things to consider in this instructional part is if you can embed formative assessments within this, like all of these on the side, it really makes this more student-centered, so that the kids are in charge of their journey along their learning path. And then you get to sip the soup every once in a while. So it's kind of puts a little perspective on it. And then the next piece is, how do we sequence all that learning? And then we have progressions, moving from simple to complex. You can change the parameters. You can add content, make it engaging. You can add health-related fitness components or language arts or numeracy into your games or your activities that you plan for your students. You can add complexity by putting scoring or leveling targets or moving the targets, or you can add defense if that's the case too. So now that we have the data, let's take a look at where we go from here. We need to decide on the most compelling evidence to determine the level of achievement. So if you have a piece of paper and a pencil close by, I'd like for you to examine. This is student data. It's just underhand throw, and this is over time. So this is the same content over time with these children. So in that last box, I would like for you to just go through and make a decision about what you would put in that last box. So how would you determine that level of understanding by the end of the grading period? And take note that David is all over the place. I'll give you a minute. Okay, answers. Well, these are some answers. This is not the definitive answers. So with Glory, it's a little bit obvious. She was working on it, and she nailed it, and she's a very strong 2. Okay, Ralph had a good day, and then not so much, and then he was good, and then boom, the last time he was able to throw the target he was throwing to was moving. And then Alice on this great journey, but something happened to Alice on the last trial, and maybe she was sick the day before, or her cat died. There could be a whole lot of reasons. So I would take that one out, and she would still be a 2. And then we look at David. He's all over the place. he's got it, and then he doesn't have it. He's got it, he doesn't have it, and then he's really got it, and he's like so. So with David, I'm gonna give you a little insight. With David, we have to know our students. So with David, he gets distracted really easily. His behaviors can get out of hand. If he's really buying into the activity, he does really well. If there's any moments of distraction, we kind of lose him, and it's hard to capture his evidence at that point in time. So I know that David can, with this particular content, he can move beyond proficient, even though all these other things have distracted him in his learning. So I need to separate out those behaviors in this content. When it comes to the psychosocial piece, that might alter that piece of the pie. But for this, just simply, how does he perform in a motor skill? He's a 3. And Ellie rocks. This is like typical. She's working on it, and Ellie's probably worked harder than any of the other kids because she's working on it. She nailed it, and then she's really blossoming. So this is kind of a way for you to collate all of that data. So now we're going to look at how do we take all that data and put it into a report card, or a progress report. So generally speaking, our report cards kind of look like we have 1 or 2 or 3 maybe spots on the report card, and if we're lucky, we have the same proficiency scale as the classroom teachers. But this would be an example of a progress report that you might generate outside of the district report card that goes out. So so on the top you see just the legend that will help the parents understand what a 3, a 2, a 1, and a not assessed are. And then this would be 2nd grade, because you can see the outcome is S1 E3 3.2, which is 2nd grade. So throws underhand using a mature pattern. And parents really want to know the criteria for success, because number one, they're gonna be able to help their child at home. And also it gives them a clear idea that you do have something clearly in mind for how you are assessing their child's level of achievement. So in this case, in term number 1, this student might have arrived late in the term. So maybe they came a week just before the grading period. So you don't have enough evidence to really claim where they are in their learning. And then level 2, they were at a 2, and level 3, they just blossomed. So now we're going to kind of get into the how. So we're going to talk about how you go about doing this. And so this will be the process. So there's some basic decisions that need to go in. Oops, excuse me. Basic decisions that your professional learning community needs to collaborate on. So what are the most enduring content standards or outcomes? What do my students need to learn, not just experience, that they can use for now and the future? And what are the need to know content standards that will be formally assessed? So if you've ever tried to formally assess every single content standard, you know that it's tedious, not very much fun, not very engaging. So, and besides that, how can you actually capture multiple times that same learning when you have so many content standards to attend to? So we're going to talk about this need to know content. In order for us to really pull out what that need to know content standard, we need to kind of have some parameters to make our decisions. So what can my students learn that will help them prevent injury, or enjoy social interactions, or move for health, or move to find joy and delight, learn new movement challenges, improve motor skills, get along with others, how to persevere. All of those things are some considerations where you can get your biggest bang for your buck. And then you also have to consider, how much time do you see your students? I saw my students for 30 to 40 minutes, 30 to 40 hours in a whole school year. And that's without interruptions. You need to consider what your community looks like. So if skiing is what your children do, then you need to create situations where they're going to learn balance and agility and reaction time and all those things that are going to help them to engage in the activities that are in their community. You need to consider what kind of technology do you have access to? What are your facilities and what's your equipment? And then what kind of sports or activities, martial arts, whatever, dance, cheerleading, what kind of activities are your students currently attending to outside of school? So those are some things to think about when you're deciding on your need to know content standards. So I'm going to take you through an example of a district that decided on their program goals, which would be their need to know content standards, and some of the rationale behind their thinking. So in the 5th grade, their students will demonstrate proficiency in, and they chose throwing, catching, and jump rope as what they're going to capture evidence of learning. And the reason they chose that was because they're foundational for other skills. And then for the motor skill concept piece, they decided that offensive and defensive tactics and strategies would be encompassing a lot of content. So target games, net wall, striking, invasion. So it would go through the entire year. And with K2 students, space, pathways, levels, shapes, speed, direction, force, all lead up to the content and even locomotor skills that would go into that tactics and strategies for the upper grade kids. For fitness knowledge, they wanted to have their kids analyze their fitness results, set goals, and plan for improving areas of need. And in the lower grades, just learn those basic fitness concepts that go into that. And then this part we tend to be pretty good at, and that's that personal and social behaviors. So making sure that the criteria for those personal and social behaviors are really explicit became the goal of this particular group. Now, there were teachers in this district that had a great deal of organizational skills and practice in capturing evidence. So they were actually able to capture more motor skills than just throwing, catching, and jump rope. But every teacher in this district was dedicated to using these content standards for their focus standards. So then we have to consider what is reasonable. So when all is said and done, we want to balance out that exploration time, the formative assessment time, balancing out, giving our kids a variety of experiences, really making sure that when all is said and done, they're still playing. And the amount of technology that you have available will determine how much of this assessment that you can actually accomplish, just because, truth be told, the more technology you have access to, the more movement time and practice time your students will be able to engage in. Because we want our kids to have multiple opportunities to demonstrate their learning, and we want lots of different ways of collecting evidence, we need to keep that in mind. So the next piece is about how we actually need to attend to common proficiency scales. So in a perfect world, your proficiency scales used in your district go throughout from kindergarten through high school. The descriptors and the symbols are all the same. Doesn't always happen, but in a perfect world that would happen. And if you're in an elementary school, you'll have a standards-based report card with your classroom teachers. You want to make sure that you're using the same number of symbols and descriptors that the classroom teachers are using, because parents should really only have to learn one proficiency scale. It gets really confusing for them. So let's look at establishing kind of generic descriptors for proficiency. So this one is just really straightforward, and it's kind of based on what Shape America has determined for their use when they do PE metrics. So the first one is not assessed, and then it's needs improvement, competent, and excellent. So it's really a 3-point system, but it's really a 4-point system. You also consider that the fewer levels of proficiency you have, the easier it is, the more straightforward your descriptors can be. Oftentimes when schools have like a 5-point scoring system, It's really hard to differentiate between a 2 and a 3. So don't make it harder on yourself in your effort to differentiate all these little levels of proficiency. So some of these, once again, whatever you decide to use needs to be communicated to your students and family. This one's pretty straightforward and easy. It's got a little rhyme to it. It's easy to remember. This one is very positive and possible. So and this is really an important thing because we want our kids to keep moving and flying forward. So this one is positive, and all of these will be on the PowerPoint so you can look at them closer. And you know, if Star Wars is your bag, then make it engaging for your kids. You know, capture their attention by going with what what is in their bailiwick. And then you want to use language that students can understand and relate to. When you get a chance to look at this one, and you see that this one is a 5-point, even though it says 4, it's really a 5-point scale, but you'll see that the 1 and the 2 might be a little bit hard to differentiate between. So once we have our proficiency scales, then we need to think about, you know, what are we learning today? What do I really want my students to take away in each lesson? So this is a really an important piece that's going to help to keep all your learning focused. And this is where this what, how, why for each lesson. This is about individual lessons. So the challenge is to have one learning target for a given lesson. And I know we want to make sure that our students are working on their psychosocial behavior, and we want them to be physically fit during all of our lessons, and we want them to warm up correctly, and we want them to learn motor skills, and we want them to learn concepts. But if you can think about having one specific highlighted learning target, then it helps you to become focused, it helps your students become focused, and then there's a greater takeaway, and what happens is you have less of a chance that your content will become diluted. So this is, thank you, Joy Fight. This is what, how, and why. So this is an example of what I'm learning today. I'm learning how to throw a ball underhand so that it'll hit the target. And why is this important to learn? And what I like to think of is I generally have my own why, but your students come to you with their own why also. So so oftentimes, if you take the time to listen to why they think it's important to learn an underhand throw pattern, then they might come up with things that you hadn't even thought of. And this is going to be making, remember that horse, is going to be making them thirsty. And then how? So you're going to face the target. This is where all your critical elements come in, and this needs to be shared with your students. They need to know this very clearly. You can also use I can statements. So I can perform an underhand throw so that it's close to or hits the target most of the time. So I can statements also kind of help support that notion. So when you're collecting evidence of student learning, you need to align your rubrics with your generic scoring guide. This is very important. Provide feedback to your students for what they can work on to move their learning forward. So feedback, feedback, feedback. Numbers or symbols without feedback may not help your students moving forward. Give them multiple opportunities to demonstrate their learning. So learning happens over time, and the most current score should be considered, not an average of those scores. Peer feedback, self-checks help move learning forward. So all your formative feedback leads to learning, and it's key. It's like bigger than any of your summative pieces. So to wrap it all up, I'm going to tell you that you need to collaborate with your colleagues. They need to be on board. You need to be, it may not be, you may find that it's hard to get everyone as excited as you are, but if you can move them closer to this destination and closer to buying in, then keep working on that why, and your colleagues will kind of take risks and join the fray. And then be patient. You know that this process takes years and years. My district started out with a standards-based report card and didn't do any of the training and thinking that went behind it. And now they're going back and they have to redo all of the things that they should have done in the beginning. Do some research. I have some, I posted some blogs and books and articles and webinars that you can use to help you, and do some research. Do your own thinking. Don't just trust what I'm saying, but be your own advocate for this. Be patient. You heard that again. Listen to those who've traveled this path. Talk to teachers who are doing it. Get on social media. Ask questions. There are no dumb questions. Please just keep asking, because we're all in this journey together. You need to inform your families along the way. Be patient. Keep focused. Ask questions. Be patient and persevere. So now I'll open this up to questions.
Great job, Wendy. Well, right now the tossel's been pretty quiet. We've had lots of viewers, but nobody really asking too many questions on the tossel right now.
Oh, that's good for me. But I do like questions. So go ahead. There's a Voxer group that that is on standards-based grading. There are Twitter chats on standards-based grading, and there are Twitter chats on standards-based learning that are generic, not specific for physical education. So you have access to be able to get your questions answered. So anything else?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we talk regularly in our standards-based instruction Voxer chat. So if anybody's interested in that, go to voxerpe.com. Oh, I'm steady viewers, but nobody's wanting to chat or has good questions for us. So
okay, so if you are going to Boston for Shape America, there are several of us who are collaborating, and hopefully we have a 4-hour session on standards-based grading. So you'll hear perspectives from several of us from all grade levels. And so if you're there, please join us. It should be very informative, and we can dive a little bit deeper. And maybe between now and then, you will come up with more questions. I can't hear you.
Trying to unmute myself there. Thank you, Wendy, very much. I know. I did so good that whole time. So we're good. Thank you very much. And hopefully we will continue the chat on Twitter and see lots of people at Shape America.
Okay, great. And thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Matt, for all your work behind the scenes. Thank you, Ryan, for all your, this is such a great opportunity for us to increase our community and to share. And I just appreciate this format so much. And if you have something to share, don't be afraid to jump on here and share what you have. So thank you all for being here.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie.